The subcompact crossover segment has exploded in the last 3 or 4 years, and every automaker is trying to carve out its own little niche. The Nissan Juke helped pioneer the segment, and we always respected it for being weird and proud of it. But the Juke has sailed off into the sunset, so now it's time for another cute ute to take up the mantle of peculiarity. In my opinion, the new king of quirk is this, the Hyundai Kona. It's Hyundai's first stab at a super small SUV, and it's a good one. Behind its freaky-deaky face lies a veritable cornucopia of quality, whether we're talking about how it drives or how well it's equipped. Let's check it out. Now, the Kona definitely stands out from the crowd, and it doesn't even take all 4 of my eyes to notice why. Aside from the retina-searing lime paint job, the whole shebang is kinda wacky. Take these lights up here, for example. They're just the running lights. The real peepers are located below, and they're ensconced in a rugged-looking gray plastic that extends back to each wheel arch. The whole front end is kinda busy, but I still think it looks pretty cool. Out back, the Kona rocks a floating roof design here on the D-pillar. Beneath that, the lights are split up into 2 once again. We have the brake lights up top and the turn signal and reverse lights below, wrapped in this hardy-looking gray plastic. Now, the lines are kinda all over the place like they are on the front end, but I feel like the rear is just a little less put together. But you don't have to look at it when you're in it. That wacky green paint adds a dash of color to the dashboards, steering wheel, and seats, but otherwise the Kona's interior plays it pretty straight. You've got a floating infotainment screen, plenty of physical buttons and storage cubbies, and enough head and legroom in the back for a 6-foot-tall passenger. But while there's space for people, there is not a ton of space for cargo. At just 19 cubic feet, the Kona's cargo room is the second lowest in its segment, ahead of only the Mazda CX-3. Folding the rear seats down doesn't make matters much better. It still lags behind the Honda HR-V, Kia Soul, and Nissan Rogue Sport. Now, the top 2 trims of Kona ditched the 2-liter inline-4 and replace it with a turbocharged 1.6-liter. 175 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque might not seem like much, but this thing scoots. It is surprisingly fun to flit about and push through traffic. Its 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox lives largely in the background, calling up shifts smoothly. I wouldn't exactly call this a hot hatch on stilts, but it does pack some very composed handling, although at highway speeds it does require a fair bit of steering effort to stay centered in the lane. That feeling of composure translates to the suspension, too. It does a really good job of eating up most of the bumps and holes that cover, well, just about every road in Michigan. But while the bumps might not creep into the cabin, the noise sure does. There's a fair amount of both wind and tire noise at highway speeds, not all of which can be drowned out by simply turning up the stereo. Now, even though it's quick, it's still pretty efficient. The EPA rates the 1.6-liter all-wheel drive Kona at 26 mpg city and 29 mpg highway. Now, I got a little under that in the city, about 25 mpg, but once I was out at highway speeds, I was getting closer to 30-31 mpg. Not too bad. Now, Hyundai is very egalitarian with its tech, which means even the littlest Kona here gets a decent amount of it, especially in its top Ultimate trim. Standard safety equipment includes automatic braking, forward collision warning, lane keep assist, and rear parking sensors. Now, it's kind of a shame that there's no adaptive cruise control, and in my opinion, the lane keep assist might work a little too hard with the steering wheel to try and stay centered in its lane. Like many other Hyundais, the 2018 Kona is positively lousy with technology, so let's check the tech. We'll start here at the bottom. Now, most Kona trims just have a storage cubby here, but the Ultimate trim replaces that with a Qi-style wireless charging pad. And if you're not a big fan of wireless charging or your phone doesn't support it, there is a USB port right above it. Moving up from there, we have the main infotainment screen. On this Kona Ultimate, it's 8 inches and includes embedded navigation and Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but other trims make do with just a 7-inch unit with no navigation, but still packing Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Now, your main screen on the infotainment system lets you look at everything at once. You get to see your navigation on the left, your AV on the right, and then there's access to your apps right below that. In the event you don't feel like clicking through 1,000 times to find things while you're driving, there is a set of quick nav buttons on either side of the infotainment screen that lets you access radio, media, your map, and your phone. Now let's move over to your radio. You can listen to your standard AM and FM, and this one also includes Sirius XM satellite radio in addition to HD radio for FM. Now, if that's not your speed, you can also listen to your own music via both Bluetooth and your wired connection. Now let's move over to the phone. The phone is pretty straightforward as always. Once you're connected via Bluetooth, you can look at your call history, your favorites, and your contacts, and you even get a nice little keypad on the screen if you feel like dialing old school. Now from there, everything else is dug into a series of contextual menus. So we'll hit the All Menus button from the home page, which gives us access to, once again, the phone and media and things like that, in addition to both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Now down here under the Data Services button is where all of your fun internet-enabled services come in. HD Radio allows you to look at both weather and a layout of the Doppler radar, while SiriusXM lets you look at weather, fuel prices, stocks, sports scores, and movie times. Now in the event you just decided to wing it and know nothing about your infotainment system when you get in the car, there is a quick guide button here that lets you learn how to use the touchscreen as well as figure out your Bluetooth, your navigation, and your voice recognition. And finally at the end we have the setup button here on the right, which takes you to your settings. Lets you check navigation, sound, and display settings, in addition to a custom button, which is the star button here on the right, that you can set to multiple different things. You can have it access your phone, or your Apple CarPlay, or your data services without having to dive through all those other menus. Now the infotainment isn't the only screen available to the driver. There is also a color information display nestled in between the gauges. Using the Pages button on the right side of the steering wheel, you can go between your user settings, drive info, which includes your trip and your fuel economy averages, in addition to navigation directions and looking at the status of your ADAS. Now lastly, we have the head-up display, which is a feature on the Ultimate trim. Pushing the HUD button on the left brings up this tiny little glass screen here that is normally otherwise tucked into the dashboard, so it's not in your way. This will let you look at, on top of your speed, it'll let you look at the speed limit, in addition to navigation directions, information regarding your blind spot monitoring, and your ADAS, all at the same time. Hyundai's cars are, by and large, very sensible machines. The 2018 Kona is one of those, but sensibility doesn't automatically mean that it's as boring as a burlap sack of white rice. It's wacky enough to get attention, but it doesn't let that eccentricity impugn on its functionality. As crossovers go, the Kona's a good one. It drives quite nicely, and it'll hold adults in comfort, although the bags in the back might be a little cramped. And like many other Hyundais, it is positively brimming with the sort of tech that'll give drivers a little extra peace of mind. With a starting price of $19,500 and this one topping out a hair under 30 grand, it is pretty affordable for what it offers.